So next up, it's a group talk, but we have one presenter, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her first before I mention the others. So this is Chanté Davis. So she's a National Resource Management Specialist in the Sustainable Fisheries Division of NOAA Fisheries West Coast Region. And in her current role, she's helping her branch modernize how they analyze and track the impact of hatchery programs using innovative approaches in R, and has spearheaded approaches to start an internal R training program for the region. So her co-authors are Emily Markowitz, Diana Dishman, and the talk name is called Different Strategies for Teaching Your Colleagues R, Lessons Learned and Recommendations. So take it away, Chanté.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yep.
Okay. And now I am sharing the big screen and only the big screen?
Yes.
Great.
You're good.
Thank you for that introduction. As it was mentioned, I am a natural resource management specialist, but my background is in bioinformatics, age growth life history, and a lot of genetics for our deep sea and anadromous fishes. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Diana and Emily, who you've heard talks from earlier in this week, for working together with me to create this. Well, we collaboratively created all of the components of the lessons that you will be seeing today. I would like to reiterate and circle back to a couple comments that the presenters in this session have made. The one about finding people in your area who also whisper quietly in the dark recesses of their office cubicles, I love R. That is how I came to find Diana and Emily. I've worked with Emily in previous iterations of my career and currently work with both of these ladies in NOAA Fisheries. I also like to acknowledge what Kate said about don't R alone, because these ladies both code regularly and having a community is really important. And that is something that brought us all together, was that we saw a way of using R to help with our management, current positions in management. And so these words you see in their thought bubbles, I asked them to put in words that bring forward an image of how they think about R and how it works in our workplace. For me, that was consistency, balance, and efficiency. My first foray into R was through my data set in bioinformatics crashing, because I was using Excel, the shame. And we all know that large data needs to have coding associated with it. And so I stumbled hard into needing to be in a place where I can have reproducible work. And when I first started this position, I recognized that that is something that is definitely prominent in my job now from day to day. As a resource manager, I create a lot of documents. Sometimes those documents are the same thing. I'm doing the same type of summarizing data, but it'll be different types of data. And the context for the product is federally regulated. So we have documents and wording that has to occur. So these repetitive tasks mean that we can start thinking about how to put this into R and have it be coded. We also have to have well-documented products. And so via FOIA, which is a publicly available way to get data from our agency, we have to turn over everything that we've done, and having good documentation is one of those components to meeting that requirement. And so R created this kind of place where Diana and Emily and I thought, we have a need. How can we bring this solution, which is providing a coding context, to other folks in our office? The problem is that staff and leadership may not know what skills are necessary to begin coding. They may not know what coding things are available. Frankly, there are a lot of people who really love pivot tables, and that is just difficult to pass from one person to another. So we really wanted to set out to raise awareness, find those other super secret folks who are saying, I love R, in the recesses of their cubicle, and bring them together to begin making our daily lives and our daily tasks a little bit more efficient, or a lot more efficient. And as we continued talking, my co-conspirators and I, we realize that there are some places where this is kind of a no-brainer go-to. We already have some web tools that are available online, so you can go to the web, and Fisheye is one example in NOAA Fisheries. You can ask questions about data that we have at our disposal, and ask questions about ex-vessel prices or fisheries by region or all of those types of things. There are other divisions that this type of dashboard would be really beneficial in serving that piece of our agency's mission, which is public serving, right? Being sharing in transparency our data and the decisions that we make to get there. Emily earlier today talked about creating these standardized reports we have to publish every year and bringing in lots of data to produce those reports and automating different pieces of those so that we begin to have a product that doesn't take the better part of 2 or 3 years in order to get off the ground and be produced. So it's really speeding up that time. R can help us with that. And she presented earlier this morning and also has a YouTube video of this document and how she was able to bring all the pieces together. So you can ping her now, she's online. And then I want to highlight Diana Dishman's talk. As someone else earlier today stated, she really highlighted well how we use R in our process documents, especially for things like permits. Those are done yearly, people have to request them, and there's some summarizing information and analysis that has to go on behind the scenes in order to assess whether or not a permit is going to be given. So all of these things are tasks that we do repeatedly, and there's a place for R in helping make these documents more efficient and transferable from person to person as people move around in job positions. So how does this happen? Our co-conspirator planning, as I like to call our group, created a variety of different trainings for different groups within our agency and also external to our agency. So the next few slides, I'm going to kind of go through some of those approaches. There was a 2-day workshop that was within our agency. I presented a 90-minute workshop to jumpstart new coders, and this was presented at BlackInMarine Scienc Week during the pandemic. There was a 5-week course that was offered to fishery biologists, and that was more of a structured course. So there was office hours, there was homework, and there were periods of time to work on data that was job specific. And then there was a 3-day facilitated course Diana and I ran where we brought in and tried freely available courses that are online to show folks how to go to online resources and use things that are already available. And this is how this breaks down. So I'm going to explain the audience, the goals, the duration of each training, the style, as well as the type of support. And again, this is just an example of what we've done. And then I'll later in this presentation talk about where we can go and what we've learned. So to start off with, in each of these different trainings, the goal and the audience varied. And so our approach in order to present the goal or achieve the goal for each of these groups also had to change. So for example, the 90-minute BlackInMarine Scienc presentation was a 90-minute presentation to jumpstart new coders. So coders were coming to the table from across the nation and were in positions where they were going into their master's or PhD, and they were being told, like, there's R, use it, you're gonna have to know it. But how do they start? Where do they go? It's not part of their curriculum, so what happens? And so this was a place where we could begin that conversation. This is different than the 5-week and the 3-day presentation or trainings that we held. In the 5-week training, peer fisheries biologists or our colleagues who are fish biologists, they go out into the field, they collect data, it's environmental data, there's a lot of pre and post processing. Then there's the expectation of some sort of analysis and possibly a publication at the end of it, right? So there is a very distinct process that this information has to go through. So the goal was to increase fluency in R, get the folks to have a better understanding of common packages and the tools to analyze that specific data set. Versus, now we talk about a 3-day course. And this was for resource managers like myself. We are not necessarily in the field collecting data. I'm using existing data sets that exist in Washington, Oregon, and California, and Idaho, specifically for my job, about the different types of releases and fishery hatchery information that hatcheries provide and the state collects. So we needed folks to get into R, get up and running, open a data set, and then know where to find help and really be self-sufficient in being able to identify what help they'll need and how to address it in their work plan. So the times also varied, as you can see here. We went from a 90-minute to a three-day class. And in all of these, we've only offered these once. So we're analyzing the feedback now to see how the structure for each of these offerings should be changed. And that feedback is integral to really targeting what is a useful way to present this information for our audience. The styles were also different in our 3-day presentation or in our 3-day training. We only had 5 hours a day. So the morning half was spent largely looking at online tutorials. And then the back half of the afternoon, folks brought in their data sets and we applied those tools that they learned in online training to their actual data. And Diana and I were there to help them with those hurdles of getting through where each of those steps. So this is very early stages of getting people to do work. And again, the support was varied. So these trainings varied from leadership supported, leadership proposed, to peer supported and staff proposed. So each of these had hurdles in the sense that we may not have had dedicated time from our existing work plan to be able to present any of these. So what did we experience from each of these? I'm going to highlight here the unexpected outcomes because we've talked, I think in the previous 2 talks, you've heard a lot about what it takes to get a training up and running and the things you need to think about. We definitely did much of the same types of things. So let's talk about those unexpected outcomes. For the 2-day, social scientists gathered from across the center. We wanted to raise awareness of how R can be applied to daily tasks. So kind of like a highlight of the highlight reel from your game, right? So this is all the like, ooh, let's do that. The unexpected outcome was there was a lot of cross-pollination because this course started pre-pandemic in its thought process. Once the pandemic hit, the opportunity for more people to join was created a larger class outside of just social scientists. And so we suddenly had this kind of cross-pollination among different disciplines. And there was a lot of folks getting excited about and interested about the things that the social scientists were doing and the things that the climatologists were doing. And myself as a manager, seeing all of this data and what is possible and all of the dashboards, that's really exciting. That's where we want to take our management game to, right? For the BlackInMarine Scienc presentation, I didn't spell that correctly. I'm going to add that E on there. We had new folks coming in who were just new to graduate school, new to coding, maybe didn't have any idea of what was going on in this world or where to get started. And the unique thing that came out of this was that we connected BIPOC coders from around the nation. Some were even on the same campus and didn't even know each other were there. And so this is when we think about equity in the marine sciences, equity in coding, this is where that type of thing begins to happen, where folks who are in isolated silos suddenly are able to realize that they have a network that can begin to bring them into a more inclusive environment. Our peer fisheries biologist here, and also in the next slide, you'll see the commonality is humanizing the process. And we recognize that once the students realize that as facilitators, myself, Diana, and Emily, we were also learning. So R is not something that you just suddenly become a master and you're walking around like Yoda. You're always learning. And that is what the 3-day piece also taught us, is that normalizing failure is something that we need to continue to work at. So while you want to teach folks how to code, you also need to teach them that they have to fail in order to get better. And the best example of that is by yourself failing in front of them, sometimes massively. I think the best places were when I broke something I had running and then I had to go find help. So they saw me fail, saw me fix it, and learn that process. And this is what we heard back from all of the students. So of course, it's fun to see the kudos given to you, but we also kind of have these nuggets of very tangible items that we can take forward. So here, right, I'm highlighting accessible and fun. I can finally ditch Excel because now I have a way of reproducing the same example over and over again, or the same answer, right? Finding that time to sit down and do R in your workday, right? We provided that hour or that 4-hour chunk of time in their workday that was scheduled so they can come back and get working on their products, because the hurdle to learn coding is very steep. And then also never feeling silly about asking a simple question, right? That comes back to normalizing failure. If I'm not above asking a question, then students should not be above asking a question, but we have to demonstrate that through action. So what did we learn across the board? Folks are eager to learn, but we need to move slowly through the material. And we have to remember, as instructors or people who are further along in our coding skill, that what that felt like the first time you had to code something, right? Your first line of code and writing syntax, probably you don't remember hitting your head against the computer screen. Or maybe you do because you just broke something and now it's not working. Forming cohorts and having a plan for post-workshop support is also key. We tried to get our students to form a natural cohort, but depending on how short your time is in that, you're not able to really get that to start being organic. You might have to actually make a plan for it and get people excited about it. So here's some logistical and philosophical pieces. I think I'm going to leave this piece for questions afterwards, but one thing I want to highlight logistically is capturing those aha moments, and here's how I did that with my group. We had a wrap-up Nailed It. So there's this online program called Nailed It, where people try to recreate cakes that are obviously outside of their ballpark. So this is the screen that it looks like. We used a platform. It was very simple. We allowed people to write their own words of things that they found, those successes that happened, and also the face palms. So it can be as simple as I keep forgetting my capitalizations in my file names. And that is a transformative way of thinking. R thinks differently than how you save your files from Excel. So you need to go back to the drawing board of how you've organized your entire computer and put in those underscores and start capitalizing things. And I think I heard someone say final. That's not going to work in R anymore. So you got to come up with better names. And this is a place where that happened, and we kept a track of it so the folks could see each day that they've learned something, or each day someone else had the same struggle that they had. So what are our next steps? We really want to connect our teams to their tasks using R as the platform that'll make our life better. So we really want a long-term strategy, changing the culture of thinking of clicking through Excel cells to get a summary to coding it so it happens all the time. And then we need a continued space to work together. So building those core cohorts, thinking of how to get people networking together and finding a space where folks can come and start coding and realize that they're not coding alone. So I'm going to circle back to Kate's "don't R alone." That is this continued working together. And I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wrap that up here and say that this is how I feel when my code works, right? We are super excited. We can come back to our coding and have things not break. So that is what I have today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Chanté. That talk was super inspiring, and hopefully you'll get time to look at the chat because you have a lot of fans. And,